Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us on another episode of The Advance. I'm Brandon Walton, Senior Editor here at Texas Scorecard, and we've got a big week coming up here in the state of Texas. We've got campaign finance reports as well as some interesting goings on in the courts. We're going to talk about that just now, but first want to let you know Michael Quinn Sullivan not going to be joining us today, but we've got a lot going on this week. Now, the big date that needs to be circled on the calendar is January 15th. Okay, so this Thursday is a big deadline, a big marker in the campaigns that we've had going across the state as we head into the March primary. That's because on January 15th is the deadline for the second half financial reports for the second half of the previous year. So what that means is that on January 15th, we're going to know all the campaign finance reports for state races in the second half of last year. So it runs through, December 31st, and those reports are due a couple weeks later. So January 15th, and this is going to give us some insight into a few things. One, it's going to tell us which campaigns are actually out there raising money, which tells you a lot about the viability of certain races, especially when it comes to some of these open seats that we have in some of these Texas legislative races, as well as the open seats that we have at the top of the ticket, things like the Attorney General's race, right? We're going to know a lot more about who's raising money and who's not, and who has probably the better chance heading into the March primary. Because remember, even though the primary is in March, early voting starts mid-February. That means we're actually just now, if you can believe it, just about a month away from people actually casting votes in the March primaries. And so things are really, really ramping up now. Those campaign finance reports are going to tell us a lot. Now, those aren't the only reports that are due. As we get even closer to the election, there are going to be some periodic reports, a 30-day report, and then a few reports that'll be due before then. But these campaign finance reports certainly set to tell us a lot. We're also going to see campaign finance reports for the Senate race. Now, they're governed a little bit differently because that's overseen by the Federal Election Commission, not the Texas Ethics Commission, like these state races. But we are going to see some numbers in that Senate race for the fourth quarter of 2025. John Cornyn, the incumbent senator, out there today with a statement saying that he's raised $7 million in the fourth quarter of last year, bringing him to $15 million cash on hand. That's what he says. We haven't seen that report, but that's what he says. We will, of course, find out this week how much Ken Paxton has on hand and how much Wesley Hunt has on hand, and what that will mean for the state of that race heading into March. And so some very, very interesting races there and some very interesting campaign finance reports that we're going to be following. We're going to be reporting up at TexasScorecard.com this week. Another issue that we're going to be talking about this week comes from Travis Morgan, our legal reporter, who's following an interesting case that you may not have seen that's happening in the Texas Supreme Court. This is a case dealing with a detransitioner, somebody who had been essentially coaxed into transitioning, right, doing gender mutilation procedures at a young age, and then decided to, obviously regretted the situation and has since then become an activist against these gender transition procedures in minors. Soren Aldaco, according to court filings, says she was a mentally vulnerable teenager struggling with depression, anxiety, and identity confusion. And now she has a lawsuit. There's a lawsuit out there suing the healthcare provider, I put that in quotes, essentially this counselor, who wrote the letter. And in many ways, this lawsuit actually says coaxed her into getting a double mastectomy. Now, this has been making its way through the courts. The Texas Supreme Court is now reviewing the case, and oral arguments are set for it on February 11th. Travis Morgan's going to have more details on that case. That's what's happening in Texas. Meanwhile, you may have seen that on the national stage, the United States Supreme Court is taking up a case dealing with protecting women's sports from men essentially competing in women's sports. Texas is one of many states now, I believe 27 states, that have passed legislation requiring or prohibiting, I should say, men from competing in women's sports, like we have seen happen with some of these transgender athletes. Now you have a lawsuit dealing with Idaho and West Virginia, two states that have implemented similar laws to Texas. Texas has signed on in support of those states. That court hearing is going to be happening in the United States Supreme Court this week. And when they ultimately decide on that case, which would probably happen in the coming months that will have an effect on whether or not Texas can continue to protect women's sports. Remember, this is something that Texas has done at the high school level and then has now done at the collegiate level this last session. So that's something we're going to be watching at the United States Supreme Court. So there's interesting things to watch at the Texas Supreme Court, also some interesting cases to watch in the United States Supreme Court. Another issue that we've got up at texasscorecard.com right now, during the last legislative session, Texas passed a law to prohibit cities from implementing these abortion travel funds. So most abortion procedures have been illegal in Texas since the Dobbs decision of the Supreme Court that overturned Roe v. Wade. And so what you saw from places like Austin and San Antonio, who's actually the subject of this story up on the website today, is that they would then create, okay, we're going to create a reproductive justice fund. That's what the city of San Antonio called their fund. And we're going to use that money to give to people who want to get an abortion. We're going to pay for their travel, pay for their airfare, pay for their hotel, whatever. We're going to pay for them to go to another state where abortion is legal. And that's how we're going to end run around the law. Now, this has been attacked on two fronts. One, like I mentioned, you had legislation that passed this last session that actually dealt with this, Senate Bill 33, that went into effect in September, that says very specifically that cities cannot use taxpayer funds to provide abortion tourism travel, which is essentially what this is. It's essentially what San Antonio was doing. At the same time, you had the Attorney General, Ken Paxton, even before this law went into effect and even before it even went to Governor Abbott's desk, suing San Antonio, saying that even under state law as it is, that the city was violating the law. And so this was attacked on both ends. Now we have a report today that the city of San Antonio has officially ended its taxpayer-funded abortion travel fund. Okay, this is obviously a big victory. The city of Austin already similarly ended that fund as well, but this is obviously a big victory for those for pro-life advocates in Texas. And so as we continue looking through this week, as I mentioned, we're going to be looking at these court cases. We're going to be looking at these campaign finance reports. And of course, we're going to continue to have reports on what's happening in education across the state. Aaron Anderson, of course, always keeping up with what's happening in the classroom, some of these bad apple teachers and reports of abuse in the classroom. We're going to continue, of course, to have those. But for right now, I'm Brandon Waltons. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.